Hey everyone, I'm going to give you a quick little rundown on Ckd, which is a project I'm working on for the Diro DArc competition. It's open web services for dApps, and obviously it's built on Diro. I just mentioned that. A little bit about the origins. So way back, this was about like 10 years ago when I was in college. I started a company with my roommate called Stacked. And what we did with that was we sold like website hosting. So we were trying to make it simpler than even cPanel to host a website and get online. And that kind of fizzled out, and we kind of like got jobs and stuff. But it had always kind of been on the back of my mind, especially with stuff going on like I don't know, just like on the web and the whole like privacy debate. And you just got these giant companies like Facebook and Twitter who really have just a lot of control over the web. It's not really how I think the web was envisioned. So I had kind of been thinking about, okay, like how do we kind of get back to more of the spirit of the web where you have these individual websites, people own their own domain. It's not you're on somebody else's domain. You have sort of your own spot that you control. So that's always kind of been at the back of my mind. And the way I kind of saw that with Stacked at least was instead of like the hosting company Stacked trying to be like an AWS or something like that, instead we make all of our stuff like open source. So we have sort of like open web services, and especially as like blockchains and crypto got more popular, I started thinking, okay, I mean, we might be able to make this just like entirely peer to peer and like really cool. And that's sort of where I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So like CKD, the last three letters of stack, like initially I was thinking of it as the stacked backend, but you could also think of it as like compute, key value, and distributed. Um, and I think initially it's just going to be, I love how a train decides to drive by right now, but initially it's just going to be compute. So the state won't live within like CKD itself. It'll just live on like the Diro blockchain or DAG chain or whatever it's called. I'm not overly knowledgeable about this stuff yet, so still learning. But anyway, I think that's about it. And yeah, again, built on Diro, which I was super excited to find Diro because yeah, I had been thinking about these things and I just couldn't like really figure out how to make it work. But then yeah, Diro is awesome. So now a little bit about the why. I think I actually already mostly covered it, but I think it's really important to give people an out. I think a lot of times in like, I don't know, in the past, like I've just been like, especially on like Twitter and stuff like that, you'll just be overly critical of things, but you won't necessarily give people like a way to escape from that. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm being critical. Um, so what we want to do is give people an out to these closed proprietary services and rent seekers. So this goes beyond this like I don't know, goes pretty deep. But like think of a company like Uber, for example, and all these what are they, like the gig economy companies. So they have all of these people working for them, and then they take a pretty big cut. When I think, especially with like these peer-to-peer blockchains, I think we could probably not necessarily like Uber. Like I know they've got a lot of technology and stuff that might be hard to replicate. But I mean, especially like over time, I think a lot of that stuff is going to move towards more peer-to-peer solutions where you don't have this just giant, and we'll get to the unicorns in the next bullet point, but you don't have these giant unicorns that basically corner an entire market. And it's kind of interesting, but the companies aren't even really profitable. It's just like they're getting a bunch of money thrown at them. I think it'd be much better if we could just move those things to be peer-to-peer and anyone could take advantage of them and not have to pay this percentage to some company. And yeah, the next bullet point was kind of a joke on that. It's just like take back the unicorn. I think nobody owns a unicorn, obviously, but like, I don't know, when I think of a unicorn, I just think of like, oh, it's like something unique, but now it's like a mold that you fit into. It's a giant company that, I mean, you got your checkbox. It's like, oh, you're worth $1 billion, you're a unicorn. So yeah, let's take back the unicorn while we're at it. Okay, a little bit, sorry, I didn't do the best with these slides, but what is this? What does this look like for, we're going to go through a couple personas. So what does this look like for developers? So We'll get to this more. I'm going to show you a little bit of code, and I'll show you how it actually works in a browser. But for developers, I think this should be pretty easy. You just need to do like an npm install. This is for like a front-end application developer. So most developers today are familiar with npm. All you would have to do is do npm install ckd dash, and then whatever your platform or framework of choice is. So, for example, like a bare bones web app might just use the web SDK, whereas I'm actually using React.js in an example app that I'll show you later. So in that case, it would be npm install ckd-react. And what does that give you? So we'll, again, get into this a little bit more, but it gives you some easy to use, easier to integrate channel APIs. And I guess the big difference between a channel API, which is something that the Phoenix framework, which Ckd is built on, provides, is that a channel API is stateful. So it's actually really cool. So what I ended up doing is you have a Redux store on the client that manages the state for the client on the channel. And then you also have something very similar, which is a gen server, which is Erlang/Elixir. I don't know, it's like something built into that, which gives you, I don't know, look into it. I won't go into it too much here, but it's pretty cool. We'll look into that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, what we really want to do is let developers focus on what makes their app unique. So as a developer, I mean, especially, I don't know, I don't want to spend like a whole lot of time if I'm just like wanting to build a dApp on a lot of these backend services. We can have a lot of these backend services be, I don't know, the same across a bunch of different applications. Whereas now I think, I don't know, it just feels like data is siloed within companies and stuff like that. So moving on. Now, what does this look like for everyone? So kind of the user experience that we're going for here is all you need to do is install an app, which people have done before. Then once you, and this will make sense once I kind of demo it a little bit more, but once you install that app, you'll be able to log in with WebAuthn to this app, essentially. Then, actually, I won't go too far into that yet. I'll just show you the demo. But basically, what you're going to get is you're going to get a lot less lock-in. So it's going to be cross-platform, like cross-application services, and eventually data storage. And I think what would be really cool, so like kind of how I envision this, and I kind of touched on this before, but kind of how I envision this is like you have all these services, and then depending on, so like let's say, I don't know, I have like sauceman.net, and I want to throw up some recipes on there or something like that. I could use a Ckd service to build that into my own domain. So I could pick and choose which, I don't know if you want to call them like service stacks or whatever, but I can pick and choose what I want to put on my site. And I don't know if you've ever used React.js before. Like if you're writing your own custom components, I think it can like be difficult and you need to learn how to code. But for the most part, if you're just using like pre-built components and pre-built services, I think we can make this pretty easy. And like, again, like this doesn't need to be like married to React.js, for example. Like there are a bunch of other frameworks that are similar. But I think website development is getting to the point where it's basically kind of just like configuring components and arranging them. So I think basically anyone can do that. And so I think that'd be really cool down the line to, I don't know, make it more accessible for people to build their own websites. So, which is, I guess, kind of the original mission of Stack. So, moving on. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the demo. And I've got the grimace face here just because it's not, I mean, it's not anything like mind-blowing, but here we go. Oh, whoops, that's for later. But okay, this is the outro slide. I'll just do this now so I don't have to go back to it. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm Sauceman, company Stack. I kind of did these out of order. The real Ckd is actually the one that I created for this open source project. And then stack.com is the website if you want to go there. It's pretty underwhelming right now. It's waiting on the Ckd. Okay, so And actually, real quick, I'll just go back to this, like what this means for everyone. So, install an app. So right now, and I'll show you the code. If you don't know how to code, I'll do my best to kind of explain what's going on. But basically, we're setting a variable here where we're getting the connection information, and then we're displaying on the screen whether it's connected or not connected to the Ckd like server or daemon that the user installs on their machine. And if so, like right now it's connected because I have it running on localhost port 1818. But if I change this, so if I take out that last 8, notice that that changed to false, so it's not connected. So this is kind of a signal to the developer that they don't have the app installed, so they'll be able to display something that says download the like stacked app or whatever, which will have Ckd bundled into it. And then once they have that installed and running, this thing basically gracefully reconnects. So once it's installed and running, it should be able to detect that it's running. So like if I put this 8 back in here, notice how it just changed to connected true. And then we got some stuff from the server, which I don't think I'll go too far into that. But basically what we're going to do here is we're using WebAuthn to authenticate into the like Ckd instance that's running on our machine on localhost 1818. So first we need to register a new, I guess, like device is what we might call it. So I'm just going to register my my MacBook and just use Touch ID here. So I just click that. I'm going to say built-in sensor. I'm going to use Touch ID. And then I don't know if we even need this part, but I have it checking the make and model as security key, but we'll allow that. And yeah, you can see that. So we ended up in this, I'll go real quick back over the code. So we're doing something similar here to the connection where we set an auth variable, and we can basically do the same, or not the same, but similar stuff with that. So I forget where I was actually even going with that. Where was I going with that? Oh, right. So this awaiting authorization true, that comes from the auth channel. And just to kind of explain this, so right now we've created a login, or like we've registered a login with Ckd, but Ckd needs to know like, okay, like we basically need to approve that new like login or account to do things. So we need to authorize it. So this page is really ugly, but when I click this, you're going to notice the stuff on the other side of the screen change. And when I click this, it's going to basically authorize the new, account or login. Okay, so there we have that, and now we basically just got like a token. And that I think is pretty much it for now as far as functionality. I was kind of hoping I'd be able to build in like some sort of actual service, but I just didn't have time, and there's definitely some work to do. But I guess I'll go over a little bit more code, and then we'll call it quits. So if you're not like a developer, I would encourage you to kind of watch even if you're not a developer, just because it could be interesting. And I think, I don't know, coding is a good skill to kind of pick up. You don't have to be like, I'm not the best coder ever, but I think sometimes people just get really intimidated when they see a monospaced font, but a lot of it isn't that complicating. So I think we kind of went over this, what it looks like from a developer's point of view. Now I'm going to dive a little bit into how it works behind the scenes, and this is really kind of the grimmest part because I kind of like breezed through this. But I'm just going to kind of walk through a little bit of what it looks like to implement a channel on the client side. So I'm not going to talk too much about the actual implementation of this. I'm just going to talk about the parts of it. So, and this will actually be helpful. So A channel, at least right now, a channel is made up of a reducer, which is a function that takes in like state and then an action that can be used to modify that state. So there's an initial state, which you kind of saw this stuff printed out on the web page. So here's our initial state, and then this reducer basically controls any modifications to that. So it takes in whatever the state was, and then it takes in an action that can be used to modify it. And yeah, there's a lot of to-dos and ugly code there. Now, actions are basically functions that you can call on the client side. And I won't get too far into it, but you can choose to like push an action to the server as well, so that it can kind of handle things. And like this, I'm not even using this, was left over. But yeah, so that's what an action is. And then selectors are kind of, I don't know, just ways of reading state. So like you can give like predefined functions. So like you can pass an isExisting login function, for example, that does some checks for you. So that's what a channel looks like on the client side as far as the implementation goes. And then on the server side, it's in a different language, but it's fairly similar. So this is in Elixir, and an Elixir channel has its own state, which lives on this socket. And yeah, we're kind of doing similar things. We're just handling different events and messages, and I won't go too far into it, but again, like you can push stuff back to the client as well. So, and then this is, I think, the last piece. So, let's see. Yeah, we got some yucky stuff up here. But this is when I was talking about, like, it's really easy to integrate these channel APIs into like a framework such as React. This is not a lot of code, and it's pretty much, it's like basically the same convention in each of these. And I guess I won't explain it too much, but I mean, just to give you an idea, we've got a couple channels and it's like 40 lines of code. So I think that's it. I think I went on quite a bit longer than I thought I would. So I will end it here, and peace.